Hey, YouTube, we are live. I'm trying to get the Instagram working here. So just bear with me 1 second. And if it doesn't work out, well, we'll give up. This is episode, oh, here we go. Something must be wrong. Try again. What's wrong? Let's see if that works. We're having trouble starting your live video. One more try. I don't know what's going on with this damn thing. We're on the right Wi-Fi. Anybody joining us today? Come say hi. Martinis with Scott. I'm just trying to get the Instagram live to start for us here. And it will not do that. All right. I've given up on Instagram. And let's talk about today's show. This is part 2, Dominion Voting Systems versus Mike Lindell. This is our Fun Friday. We try to do an interesting topic, and we are talking about the $1.3 billion lawsuit, $1.3 billion lawsuit from Dominion Voting Systems against Mike Lindell. I talked about this last Friday. Now, before we start, note that this is not a political show. I don't care about who the president is. I don't care about what party won in the U.S. I'm not here to talk about whether the election was fair or not fair, whether it was rigged or not rigged. Listen to this as clearly as possible. The system generated a President Biden. Deal with it. I have zero issue with it. Even though as I was logging on, the news from Biden was pretty funny, but not a political show. I won't go down there. My interest is in the drama of the suit itself, the business, the persuasion element of this, whether we think Dominion Voting Systems and Mike Lindell have handled this well from their various perspectives. And if you want to bring your hate to this show, just piss off. Don't listen to us. Just piss off. Go away. I did this show last Friday, and the viewership was about 20 times larger than our daily touch base that I do on live stream, about 20 times larger. And it generated a bunch of, for our channel, a bunch of hate comments on both sides. One was, Mike Lindell has no standing for the spurious claims. Spurious means just unsupported and false claims that he's made with regards to Dominion. They're going to take him to the cleaners in court. I got a lot of that sort of stuff. And then that particular comment went on to slam me personally in a number of different ways that kind of made me laugh and made me feel that this person maybe was pretty pathetic. On the other side, you must be blind with the letter U. You must be blind. Mike Lindell is an American patriot. Oh, I misread that. Mike Lindell is American patriot. No and in that word. And so comments on both sides of this thing. This show is not about the politics. It's not about the election, but this is a story in the news, and it's going to be fun. That was the point of last Friday, is we ought to keep an eye on it just for the entertainment value and for the lessons that we can draw from it. Dominion Software, the point that I was making last week is that maybe there was a better way to handle this. Maybe this isn't as much of a slam dunk for Dominion Software or Dominion Voting System, as everybody thinks, that they're up against a pretty credible force in Mike Lindell and MyPillow, who's playing a different game. So let me ask you a question. If someone says, if you're running a voting system, a software company, someone says you're a fraud, and in response to someone saying you're a fraud, and you're under crisis, Dominion Voting System was under crisis. There's no doubt about that. They're being attacked all over the press. They're a voting system, for God's sakes. Like, they have to have integrity. People have to be able to believe in them. There's no doubt in my mind that they were being attacked. And what do they do in response to that? Well, is they sue a bunch of people, including Lindell, with a huge number, $1.3 billion. They sue this fellow for, and so it's a grand action. It's a grand action intended to get attention. So they bring more attention to this fraud, the alleged fraud, to themselves, and they ensure they ensure that we're going to be talking about whether this was a rigged election or not for the next year or 2 years or however long this lawsuit takes out. Because what's going to happen? There's going to be disclosure. Lindell's going to be bringing evidence or alleged evidence or something forward. And what are we going to do? We're going to discuss. And people on the right are going to say, wow, that was a ton of evidence. He's really proven his case that this was a fraud. And people on the left and presumably Dominion voting systems are going to say, this evidence means absolutely nothing. It's not even evidence. It's just a bunch of accusations. They're unsupported. And so this means nothing. And we've won our case. And we, as the public, we're just going to be talking about this for the next few years. And do you think Dominion voting systems is ever going to recover from that? I don't think the conversation, the narrative here is going to be about whether Mike Lindell is a conspiracy theorist or not, because people on the left already think he is. People on the right, as the comment said, you must be blind. Mike Lindell is an American patriot. That's what they're going to think. Nothing is going to change that. No, the facts don't matter in this case with respect to Mike Lindell. Who's on the hot seat here is Dominion voting systems, and whether the American public or the world at large believes in the integrity of the voting system. Again, I have no evidence that they shouldn't. I don't care one way or the other. I'm not trying to focus on that. I'm talking about as a leader of a business, and you've got two businesses here going against each other. How should this have been handled? And you've got Dominion Voting Systems, who's gone after probably the most persuasive guy in the world. How is this going to work out? That was basically the show from last week. Now, I have seen since then a CNBC interview with John Poulos, Poulos, who is this John Poulos person? Turns out that Dominion Voting System appears to be a Toronto Canadian company with a head office in Spadina Avenue, which is sort of right downtown Toronto. John serves as Chief Executive Officer and President at Dominion Voting Systems. And since its inception, John has been passionate about creating Dominion's culture of transparency. Wait for it. Culture of transparency, accountability, and technical innovation. I want you to hold on to the first two of those. Culture of transparency and accountability. Holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from University of Toronto, as well as an MBA from INSEAD in Fontainebleau, France, which means you're probably a pretty smart guy, because that's a world ranking, a very highly rated MBA program. All right. On the CNBC interview, Mr. Poulson, John Poulson here, has said that Lindell caused irreparable harm to Dominion Voting through conspiracy claims, suggesting explicitly that the company was involved in an effort to steal the 2020 election in favor of President Joe Biden. As way of background, CNBC provides that the lawsuit against Lindell claims the pillow magnate, who became famous for his part in frequent appearances in commercials on Fox News, in part for his association with Trump, pushed false conspiracies about Dominion because the lie sells pillows. Lindell has claimed on multiple occasions, including in a 2-hour documentary-style film, which I touched on last week, that I've never seen, that Dominion's algorithms had been programmed to steal votes from Trump. That's a key allegation. He says that the Dominion voting systems algorithms, right, the software code that does the counting, had been programmed to commit a fraud, to steal votes from Trump. That is the allegation of Lindell, and really the heart of the pushback, I think, from Dominion voting systems. Dominion directly denied this on numerous occasions. Said that MyPillow's defamatory marketing campaign with promo codes like Fight for Trump, 45 Proof, and QAnon. Whenever somebody says something about QAnon, I just tune out. I don't even know what that means. I've heard about it on social media, but I have no clue what that is. So I usually stop listening. Has increased MyPillow's sales 30 to 40% and continues duping people into redirecting their election lie outrage into pillow purchases. So the allegation is that this is just a fraud by Lindell and My Pillow to redirect outrage into pillow purchases. Seems like a stretch to me, but okay. Okay, so when John Poulos is interviewed on CNBC, they ask him, why 1.3 billion? Where did that number come from? To which he says flat out, it's a preliminary estimate. It's hard to put a number on this sort of thing. I have a database of corporations on my computer here that I pay lots of money for. There's a couple of these things in the investment banking world. You can go to Bloomberg Terminals, you can go to S&P. I won't tell you which one it is, but Dominion Voting Software Systems is a private company, so we don't have any good data. But they do say, my magic database here tells me that the revenue is about $47.5 million in total, $47.5 million of annual revenue. Does that make them worth $1.3 billion in damages? Could it possibly be that this company suffered $1.3 billion in damages? If the $47.5 million in revenue is true, is that even possible? Probably not. This is just an outrageous number intended to get attention. They ask, Poulos says that the point of the lawsuit is to get the facts tabled in a court of law, and that Lindell is unwilling to table those facts in a court of law. Is that true? I mean, Lindell was calling out Dominion to sue him specifically so that he could get disclosure on the algorithm. Do you remember the brand that Poulos is trying to create involves around transparency and integrity? So there's one thing we know the lawsuit's going to accomplish is going to be a lifting of the kimono, so to speak, on Dominion Voting System software, because that's what both parties are talking about. So unless one of them blinks, unless one of them bails out of this lawsuit in some way or settles, there's going to be disclosure. That's what we talked about last week. So again, Poulos says the intention of this whole thing is to bring the facts to the table. Now, new this week is Lindell has announced his plans to legally strike back, claiming that the voting machine company has violated First Amendment rights and for all Americans, as well as the federal anti-racketeering laws. Lindell says you're going to have My Pillow sue Dominion in a countersuit about First Amendment speech, and you're going to have me go after them, countersuing them. Two different cases. One will be My Pillow. One will be me personally. We're both going after them. They're a little bit different because one of them, Dominion did was violate First Amendment rights of everyone in the country by using a bullying lawsuit and RICO. What they said to the news outlets, this is Lindell's allegation, what Dominion Voting System said to the news outlets is, if you let this guy on, if you let Lindell on the news, we're going to sue you too. Fox and NBC and whoever. And Lindell says, that's racketeering. That goes back to the mafia days. I told you this was going to be a fun thing to follow, and it's certainly turning out that way. On the same podcast, Lindell announced that lawyer Alan Dershowitz is advising his legal team specifically on the free speech part of his claim. And so, this is a really persuasive guy, and he's got deep pockets. He's got deep pockets to pay the best lawyers, just like Dominion Voting System does, presumably. So this will be a fun battle. And all of you think that this Lindell guy is going to get creamed in this, you're absolutely wrong. And if you think that he's sacrificing himself to be a patriot, you're also absolutely wrong. This is more than a fair fight. In fact, I think the balance of probabilities, Lindell comes out smelling like roses within his community on that. I recognize there's half of you, or more than half of you in my audience, who's probably pretty liberal, that you think this guy is evil. That's fine. That's fine. But from a business perspective, he's going to come out smelling pretty well. Let's say you are Dominion Voting Systems and you were defamed. As I said before, you probably were defamed, not necessarily by Lindell, but you were all over the news. You need the entire country to believe in you, to believe in your integrity, to believe in your transparency, to trust that that the elections are fair and free. You need 100% of Americans, not half the country. You need all Americans to believe that that's true. Otherwise, your entire brand and business plan is just going to crap, right? We can all agree on that no matter what side we're on. If you're an electronic voting system, people need to believe that the voting system has integrity. And the only way to get integrity is transparency. And so transparency, integrity, trust, those are the keys from everybody. Is it the right plan for Dominion Voting Systems to, one, call attention to these allegations of fraud by having this outrageous amount of money in the lawsuit, which guarantees that this will be a hot story for a year or a couple of years to come. And all we're going to do, as I said before, is we're going to talk about whether Lindell really has the goods on Dominion Voting Systems or not, which is, if your Dominion voting system, means the entire public is going to be talking either pro or con, but they're going to be talking about whether you're a fraud or not. That's what we're going to be discussing. Does that make any sense whatsoever if you're the CEO of Dominion Voting Systems? Now, maybe they know more than I do. Maybe it does make a ton of sense. My Pillow, on the other hand, sells pillows. They sell pillow. Do they have to sell pillows to 100% of the country? They do not. They could sell pillows to half the country if they sold a lot of pillows to half the country. Do you think there's any downside to My Pillow and Lindell standing up from a pure pillow sale perspective, standing up and saying, hey, we think that half the country was screwed here, and become, a folk hero or cultural hero within half of the country? I don't see where there's any downside from a persuasion perspective to Lindell on this. I think it's just going to work out well for him, and I don't see where there's any upside at all to Dominion Voting Systems on this lawsuit, because all we're going to talk about is whether there's evidence of a fraud or not. Dominion's at a disadvantage. They may win the battle. By the way, this whole free speech thing by Lindell is just crap, right? You can't just go defame somebody. Either you're accurate or you're not. And if you see negative things about people, which are about businesses, which is going to impact their business, and you're wrong, I'm no lawyer, but that's defamation. So you can't be doing that. Dominion Voting System, my view, may win the battle in some way, but 100%, my prediction, they're going to lose the war. They're going to lose the persuasion war, and a lot of this is from their own doing. Because when faced with this crisis, what did they do? They drew more attention to it. They ensured that it would be dragged out, and they ensured that the entire public, with whom they need to brand, they need the entire public to believe in the integrity, the transparency, and trust. They ensured that all of us are going to be watching this massive lawsuit with fiery personalities against the most persuasive dude in the world, and they've assured that we're just going to be talking about, hey, are you a fraud or not a fraud, right? The facts don't matter. The concept, what's going through our brain, is that Dominion was captured into this conversation. I don't see how that was a good thing. What could Dominion Voting System have done differently when faced with this crisis? And again, they were faced with a crisis. There's 100%, in my mind, my personal judgment, defamation may or may not have been from Lindell, but there was an attack. There's no doubt about it on the brand. And as a CEO, the brand of Dominion Voting System, as CEO, you need to do something, right? What could you have done? You should have considered changing the narrative. How do you change the narrative? Focus on what is in Poulsen's, is that his name? I think that was his name, the CEO's bio, which is focusing on integrity and focusing on transparency. He could have stood up and he could have said, hey, I recognize that with any voting system, don't worry about Dominion Voting System, with every voting system that has an algorithm, that has software, that has a black box that we can't see people counting and putting ballots into different piles, with any voting system, there's going to be a transparency problem. There's going to be conspiracy stories coming out of that. We recognize that, and we respect that this needs to be a free and transparent and trustworthy system. Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to set up a bipartisan commission. We're going to have people come in that commission and closed doors. They're going to review our algorithm. They're going to review the files from the history, and we're going to issue a report. And the intent of this is going to show that this thing is completely objective and and there is no bias whatsoever in this thing because we think that's important. That's part of our brand, and we're going to do that for you, for both sides, right and left. We're going to do it all for you. That's what he should have done. And then what would the story be? Would the story be, are these guys, is there evidence of fraud or not? That's what we're going to talk about for 2 years. We're going to talk about, is there evidence of fraud? Instead, the story should be about, wow, these guys at Dominion Voting really, really believe in transparency, in integrity, and they've set up a bipartisan commission, and I really want to see what was in that report to make things better for everybody in the future, even if nothing was wrong. Even if nothing was wrong, the thought that something could be wrong is death, in my opinion, to voting systems. Instead, what they're doing, and by the way, they should have sued Lindell. I'm not saying they shouldn't sue the people they feel they defame, but they should have done it with a really low number, a number that goes below the radar, that makes the point. Don't stand up and defame us, right? But it also has some amount of sanity and isn't the story. The story needs to be different. The story does not need to be about fraud. That's terrible. The story needs to be about transparency and integrity. That's what they should have changed the story to. That's how to handle that crisis. Instead, what have they done? I think they've played entirely into Mike Lindell's hands, and they've made their crisis way worse than it was. Apologies, we couldn't get the Instagram live going. Keep your hate away. This is about business, not about politics. We'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.